Welcome back to the news today. This is the Daily Debate. 150 Iraqi Kurdish Peshmerga fighters made their way with much fanfare to southeastern Turkey on Wednesday en route to the Syrian town of Kobane. The aim to help fellow Kurds break an Islamic State siege which has defied U.S.-led airstrikes. They will be joining fighters of the Free Syrian Army there and were sent only after heavy U.S. pressure on Turkey to allow them passage. So can it change the game at all? With me is Dr. Eldad Pardo, Iran expert at the Hebrew University. Thank you very much for being with us this evening. And Professor Dror Ze'evi, Professor of Middle East Studies at Ben Gurion University. Thank you for being with us as well. But before we begin, Ayman will tell us what people are saying. Let's take a look.
Yes, good evening, Meredith. As you mentioned, Turkey said it will send 150 Kurdish troops in order to help combat the IS. Many found this number surprising, especially because the situation in Kobane has been deteriorating continuously. So we put the question to our viewers. We asked them, can Kurdish fighters change the equation in the Kobane battle? Now, Turkey has been on the fence for a long time, avoiding military involvement despite U.S. encouragement. So will this new step make a difference? Let's take a look together at the results of our daily poll. As you can see, Meredith, 63% said yes, it will make a difference in the Kobane battle. 31% though said no. But we also asked our viewers to weigh in with their comments on the issue. Let's review what they shared with us today. First up, we have Simon, who tells us, I don't think so. 150 soldiers is a joke. Turkey is not serious about this cause. And this is something many of our respondents seem to agree with today. Next up, we have Madeline, who said Turkey isn't interested in helping the fight against the IS, or it would have done so a long time ago. What changed now, she asks. We should say that Turkey was holding off until some of its refugees were freed from Syria. And reports said that the country was not interested in encouraging the Kurds within its borders to join those in Syria for fear of a possible political imbalance. Let's take a look at another comment. We have Daniel, who tells us, I hope so. The Kurds have been fighting successfully in Syria, so they do have a chance. And this is an important point that he makes. The Peshmerga, the Kurdish army, did manage in taking over several key points from the IS, as we've seen. Lastly, we have Maria, who says, who knows where this will go? The IS is advancing, meanwhile. Somewhat of a less optimistic note to end with, but that concludes our comment section for today. As always, we encourage our viewers to continue sharing their ideas with us on Facebook and Twitter and having their say by voting on the daily poll on i24news.tv. Back to you, Meredith.
Well, thank you, Ayman, for this. Professor Ze'evi, can this really change the game? Or as one of our viewers said, 150 people is not that many in the big scheme of things.
I think he or she is right. It doesn't really change much. 150 soldiers is a platoon, company. You need a whole regiment to really change things over there. And I think it's the whole thing seems very grudging to me. Turkey does it grudgingly. And even the Kurds of northern Iraq do it grudgingly. They need the soldiers, for one thing, and they're not so happy about sending them away to Kobane. So this is a very symbolic act, maybe. And it's cause for celebration, maybe morale in the troops in Kobane, but I don't think it'll change much unless there's a bigger contingent sent to the place.
And what does this say about the Turkish authorities for allowing them passage?
As I said, they do it grudgingly. There's a whole lot of pressure from the United States to do it. There's pressure from Turkey's internal Kurdish population to help the people in Kobane. So Turkey does it, but it does it very, very unhappily because they think that Kobane and the whole area is the area that supports the PKK, the group that's fighting against the Turkish regime in eastern Turkey, and helping Kobane may strike back at them because then the PKK will get stronger. So they're not very happy about the whole thing, but they do it because they have to.
And where is Iran in this with regard to the Peshmerga?
Well, generally speaking, Iran tries. It's a little bit similar to the Turkish situation in the sense that they are afraid of Kurdish independence in northern Iraq, and they also want unlike Turkey, actually, to have Assad or at least a friendly regime in Syria. They are at the same time they are extremely afraid of ISIS, but they also try to play the ISIS card for their benefit.
Right.
Even though I would say that just like in the Turkish case, Iran is greatly responsible for the emergence of ISIS, because Iranian policy wreaked havoc both in Syria and in Iraq. In Iraq by supporting a very non-inclusive regime that is Shiite regime, and in Syria by encouraging Assad to follow in their footsteps, the same thing that they did in 2009, and led to massacres and then to genocide, because Syria is not Iran. In Iran, with a little bit of cruelty, they could manage, but in Syria it was not possible.
I see. And looking back, we actually spoke with a journalist on the ground in Erbil, Iraq, not so long ago, and she actually witnessed this procession of fighters going through and towards Kobane, and she said that they're only actually there for aid. They're not actually there to fight. So what can we make of this report?
As I said, it's a symbolic act. It's a symbolic act, both in the sense that it's a very small number, and also in the fact that there is very little weaponry and arms going in with them. It's a group of soldiers armed with very few weapons going in. It seems that they're going to help. It seems that they're going to maybe train forces on the ground, but it's really ludicrous. It doesn't really mean anything for the battle there. The support of the Free Syrian Army, which is also going there at the same time, seems to be a little more serious than that. So it may increase morale, but I don't think it'll change much, and I don't think it's meant to make a big difference in the battle.
And as you mentioned, Turkey allowed this passage grudgingly, and we've seen that Turkey seems to be avoiding confrontation in this area with ISIS. Why is that? It's on their border. It's representing a possible security threat. Why is Turkey not getting as involved as the West hopes it would?
Well, I think in a sense, it's exactly as Dr. Pardo described the situation in Iran. Turkey is torn between all these sides, conflicting sides. They want to help the Kurds maybe in Kobane to some extent against ISIS. They are afraid of ISIS, but they're even more afraid of Assad's regime staying in place. They don't want it. They want to fight against it. And they understand that fighting against ISIS makes it even harder to topple Bashar Assad. So they're torn in between these very difficult options, and they really don't know what to do. So they do as little as possible.
When do you think
how they do it.
Turkey would have to make that choice?
Turkey is being pressured all the time, especially by the United States. And one thing that we have to notice is that there are two other sources of pressure. One of them is the Kurdish population inside Turkey. There is a sizable Kurdish population. It's about a fifth of Turkish of the Turkish nation, of the Turkish people. And it's also putting a lot of pressure on the government. And the other thing is the economy. The economy of Turkey is faltering lately, and as long as Turkey goes against the United States, goes against the West, tries to delay these tactics, their position about helping Turkey's economy becomes even more difficult. So I think they'll have to make a choice pretty soon.
And can Turkey really take part in fighting against ISIS while it supports the Kurds that it actually opposes? As you said, there's a lot of conflicting areas and a lot of conflicting parties here.
Yeah, that's it. There's a very difficult choice to be made, but also there's another point that we need to take into consideration, and that's the Turkish army is really not that well equipped and not that well trained to fight against ISIS. And I think the Turks are a little afraid to put their army in this test. There's been a lot of problems in the army lately, and perhaps there's also this to be considered, that the Turks don't want to go into the fight when they're not sure about their own forces and how they would act on the battlefield.
And we will keep revisiting the issue of Kobane. But Dr. Pardo, does the fighting inside Iraq actually shift Iranian policy within Iraq?
Of course, right now when you hear the Iranian declaration, they say, well, the United States is being marginalized. We are becoming the center of world affairs. We have influence, and our borders are actually on the Mediterranean. And they repeat this, so they still talk as if we were in 2009 or 2010, just before the Arab Spring, that they had their influence in Iraq, influence in Syria, influence in Lebanon, and everything looks wonderful. But right now, they need the United States. The policy totally collapsed, and ISIS, it's amazing. Spokespeople for ISIS say, we are not Al-Qaeda, we are not your friends. So now it turns out that Iran was an ally of Al-Qaeda, and there were some experts who talked about it, but nobody, they said these are Sunnis, these are Shia. Turns out there was a lot of collaboration in fighting, for example, against the American in Iraq. The Iranians were helping the Shiites to kill Americans, and they send people, Qaeda-type people from Syria to kill American and also to kill Shiites, which could help the Iranians in the game and threaten the Kurds, so they don't have the independence. So they had an extremely sophisticated game there, but everything is collapsing. You can't play all along, and now they also with much. They are dexterous in the diplomacy, and now they say, you need us to combat. They go to the Americans. Okay, we want some advantages in the nuclear negotiations because you need us for ISIS. But actually, it's the other way around. ISIS has now penetrated into Iran. They have a lot of agents because only 10% of Iranian population are Sunnis, but this 10% is, let's say, 7-8 million. They are spread all over. Even if we assume that only 1% of them, 2% of them are, actually active, there were already a series of events that are extremely troublesome. And who knows whether ISIS will take over Baghdad. Although, the chances are not that big, but you have the holy places. Situation is very, very dangerous for Iran right now.
Very volatile in that area. And we're talking about the US-led airstrikes. What exactly is going on? Because we've seen now weeks of fighting in Kobane. Are these airstrikes actually helping? Are they making any headway? Who's in control in Kobane?
Well, Kobane is split between the two camps, and the airstrikes may have delayed the taking over of Kobane by the ISIS forces to some extent, but I don't think they're helping very much. It's pretty clear to anybody who understands a little about military affairs that you can't win this kind of war from the air. Mm-hmm. It's mostly guerrilla warfare. It's mostly done by soldiers moving around very fast between buildings. It's impossible to control this thing from the air. You can't really shoot.
Could you compare this to the Second Lebanon War here in Israel, in Lebanon?
Yes, I mean, you could compare it to both the last few wars that Israel had against Lebanon and Gaza were the same things. You're talking about places who are manned by enemy soldiers 1 minute, and then the next minute they move to another building. So it's really impossible to control these things from the air. I think in the long run, the enemy also understands how to prevent being hit by these airstrikes. So I think what is needed is an army on the ground, and I don't see that coming for a long time yet.
But is this surprising? Because we have a Western coalition aiding other forces in the area, helping the fight against ISIS. How come? How come everyone believed that somehow this coalition would come in and sweep ISIS away, and we're still seeing this happening?
Well, there are two reasons. One of them is the fact that nobody wants to send soldiers in. Nobody, the United States, Britain, France, the Turks, nobody wants to send its soldiers to be killed on the battlefield anymore. They're tired of Iraq, they're tired of Afghanistan, they're tired of all these wars. But there's also a very complex political situation, the whole area is in schizophrenia. The Iranians are against the U.S. and for the U.S. against ISIS. The Turks are against the U.S. here and for the U.S. there. The Turks are for the Kurds but against the Kurds. In some ways, the Turks support ISIS because they want them to topple Bashar Assad. In other ways, they're for ISIS because they want them they're against ISIS because they're afraid for their own country. So the political situation is so complex that you can't really find sure allies in it, and you don't know who you're fighting against. So I think that this whole situation creates a tension which will go on for a long time.
Yes, and for a long time, that is possibly what we are looking at here. Professor Ze'evi and Dr. Pardo, thank you very much for taking part in this daily debate this evening. Do stay tuned for One on One.